From the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, this is Nebraska Farmcast. I'm Ryan Evans, and on this episode, I'm joined by Dr. Jay Parsons, a professor and farm and ranch management specialist, as well as director of our Center for Agricultural Profitability here at UNL. We'll be discussing a new USDA Economic Research Service report on the integration of cover crops into livestock operations, which highlights the economic and environmental benefits. This report, featuring contributions from Nebraska faculty and students, offers insight into how cover crops can enhance the profitability and sustainability of livestock systems. Jay, thanks for joining me again.
Thanks for having me on, Ryan.
Can you just start by explaining what this report found regarding the current adoption rates of cover crops on livestock operations?
Yeah, well, it's actually pretty close to just the adoption rate on farm operations as a whole, but a little bit higher. So farm operations as a whole is about 12% of them have cover crops of some sort. Livestock operations slightly higher at about 14%. But it varies across that, especially when you look at the cattle side of it. Cow-calf producers are less likely to have cover crops on their cropland, versus dairies and feedlots are more likely.
Okay. So what are the economic benefits of integrating cover crops on livestock operations, the ones you highlight in the report anyway?
Well, predominantly it provides another forage resource for the livestock producers, and you think of dairies and feedlots in particular, that they're able to make use of that forage as part of their feeding operations, especially if they harvest it, but then also a grazing resource to help bridge the gap between, say, pasture being available in the growing season, the summer growing season, and corn stalks in this part of the country are available in the late fall, early winter after corn harvest, and so you got a little gap in there that maybe cover crops can help fill. Same thing in the spring, you got to pull the cattle off the corn stalks to get the field prepped for the next crop, and if you actually have some cover crops that you can utilize between that and when the summer pasture is ready, that's really a big benefit for the livestock producers.
Yeah, and you've been mentioning dairy and feedlot operations as being more likely to utilize cover crops. So can you just elaborate on why those types of operations find cover crops really beneficial?
Well, for one thing, they have cropland nearby their operations. It's almost all dairies and feedlots have some cropland near the actual confined feeding operation. And then, of course, they need the feed. So they are much more likely to harvest that cover crop mechanically than they are to actually graze it, as opposed to cow-calf. People are more likely to graze the cover crop. But then the caveat with the confined feeding operations is they need a place to go with their manure. So one of the reasons they had that cropland nearby is they're able to spread their manure on it, return some of those nutrients to the soil and use them as a fertilizer, and also dispose of it off of their operation. So there's kind of a win-win deal there for them in terms of being able to have a place to go with their manure and then the feed resource to come back into their operation.
Since you mentioned it, speaking of soil health and improving soil health, why is that aspect important for the sustainability of livestock systems?
Well, just in general for sustainability of ag production systems, right? You don't want to abuse the soil amount. That's basically the generator of all of the income in the end, right? You need to have that good soil properties and good soil nutrients and so on and so forth to support it. So the cover crops themselves, they provide a cover on the, by definition, cover on the soil, which helps protect the soil from wind and water erosion and things like that. And then, of course, with the roots in the ground and the actual biomass on the cropland, it actually improves the soil organic carbon and just the soil health properties themselves. And so water infiltrates better, just the soil has more nutrients in it, and so on. It's just a better overall mix as far as the use of it, rather than in a very intense, planting, mechanically harvesting, and applying synthetic fertilizer type of rotation situation.
And you said that study found 14% of livestock operations are utilizing cover crops. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the main barriers that you see for the adoption of cover crops on livestock operations, why it's maybe not more widespread, and how might those be overcome? Well,
one of them is just the cost, right? It does cost to plant any crop, right? And so if you're utilizing it as a forage, that helps because that's actually getting, harvesting a benefit off of that cover crop rather than just using it as a as a pure cover crop. And there are some cost share programs out there that can help with the cost, but that's a big one. The other one is just timing. It's another crop to get into the ground. You're dealing with the weather elements, making sure that it'll actually grow and so on, and that you're able to utilize it in a window that it's actually useful to you. And so most of that is just thinking through your system and how it might fit into your system. And then, just the overall, when we say systems, a lot of times we're also talking about crop rotation systems. And those incentives can vary from year to year depending upon the prices of the actual crops themselves. So providing yourself a little bit of flexibility within that system, but then also making sure that it fits with the timing throughout the year and when you can utilize it and when the crops can actually grow.
And do you see potential for expansion of cover crops on livestock operations anywhere in particular across the country?
Well, that was a thing that was really, we provided a map kind of as a capstone or whatever, peak in the report that we had. So we see a lot of use of the cover crops with the livestock up in the Great Lakes region and then the Heartland region. And then we see a lot of cover crops to the south and to the east because the climate is, a longer growing season and so on and so forth. But we don't see the mix in that area that with the livestock, so to speak. So there's a potential there to actually have more cattle in some of those regions. We're talking like the Appalachian region moving up through western North Carolina, West Virginia, and so on. And then on across, not all the way down to the Gulf, but on across over to Arkansas, southern Missouri, that area. There's a lot of cover crop use there because they grow well there and people are adopting them well. But there's a potential actually to use them more in mix with cattle in those regions, just based off of the numbers that we see. We also saw something like that just looking at the sheer numbers out west, but one of the big impediments out west is just soil moisture and general rainfall to support the cover crops or the more intense use of the cropland. So less potential there, even though some of the numbers match up with what we saw in those other regions. But definitely some potential through that region in terms of just, I guess, using the cover crops more as a livestock feed resource than what it's currently being used.
Great. And listeners can find this report that we're discussing on USDA's Economic Research Service website. It's on our website for the Center for Ag Profitability as well. We've linked to the article about it, and you can find the full report in that article if you follow the link in this podcast or on our website at cap.unl.edu. Again, we've been speaking with Dr. Jay Parsons from the Center for Agricultural Profitability here at UNL. Jay, thanks for the great info.
Thanks for having me on, Ryan. And I just got to give a shout out to our USDA ERS folks, Maria Bauman and her crew, for heading this up. And then also the people here at UNL that helped contribute to it, Darren Redfern over in agronomy, and then Mary Dunowski in animal science, and some of our grad students that helped contribute to it too. It really was a team effort and it was fun to work on.
Thanks for shouting them out, getting credit to them. Check out that report. Easiest to find probably on our website, cap.unl.edu. Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, Ryan.
Nebraska Farmcast is a production of the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. For the latest research-based information and education resources to manage your farm or ranch operation, visit our website at cap.unl.edu. That's cap.unl.edu.